Hello from the How I Came Up team. Thank you for joining us for this special series celebrating Black History Month. We're going to conclude this series with Al-Nisa Banks. Queen Al-Nisa is the owner of the Challenger newspaper in Buffalo, New York. She's an activist, an entrepreneur, a mom, and just a pillar in our community. Now let's get to it. This is how I came up.
My name is Al-Nisa Banks, and I'm originally from Henderson, Texas, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I came to Buffalo from Henderson with my family. I was about 5 years old. And so I grew up here in the Jasper Parish housing projects. I was the oldest of 7 children. My mom and my dad and family had a good life. We were probably considered poor at the time, but we were very rich in many other ways. Because I grew up in a predominantly white community. I'd say it was about 10 Black families in the projects at the time. The great equalizer was that everybody was in the same class. Everybody's dad worked in the plant. We all went to public school. I attended public school number 79, Riverside High School, and ultimately Payne College in Augusta, Georgia, which is a historically Black college. I applied to Buffalo State, but I wasn't able to get in because that was before SEEK and EOP, and things started leveling out a bit. But going to Payne College was a dream that I always had. I was a daydreamer actually when I was a kid. And I used to dream that I would wake up and everybody would look like me. Well, when I went to Payne College, that happened. And I was not radicalized, but introduced to who I was as a human being, and very involved in the civil rights movement when I was on campus. When I first went to Georgia, I was impressed with all the things that Black people had. We had owned Black insurance companies and all kinds of agencies and businesses, but people were still going to the back of the bus. Even though integration had quote unquote arrived, we still felt like we had to go to the back of the bus. And we did a lot of voter registration. It was a lot of activities, organizing with students at other Black colleges. And I was also the editor of the school newspaper for 2 years. So I was pretty active and pretty radical. I thought I was a revolutionary actually at the time. At the end of my senior year, I was hired by the Augusta Chronicle newspaper, the major daily there. And so I did a small stint with them, and I was the second person of color to ever step foot in the newsroom. And that was an experience. So when I came back to Buffalo, I was ready to go.
Joined by Benny the Butcher.
This is D from the projects.
Rick G.
Dr. Kelly Lucci.
Hey, what's up, Mr. D. Wilson?
It's Michelle Visa.
I'm Star Muhammad.
TJ Iceberg.
This is how I came up.
This is how I came up.
And this is how I came up.
How you doing? My name is Sam Hill, host of How I Came Up. Do you have a success story that you would like to share with the world? If so, please go to ScoreWooTV.com and submit that story. And just maybe we'll allow you to share that story with the rest of the world.
When I came back to Buffalo, I was looking to do something for my community because that's the way I was trained. The first job I had when I came back to Buffalo, I had my degree. And of course, I wanted to work for the Black newspaper. I wasn't able to transition at the time. They weren't hiring. And the white papers definitely were not hiring me. So I ended up working for Model Cities. And at that time, we started a freedom school. So we had an alternative school, but it was an after-school program that was absolutely phenomenal. Again, I was already radicalized in terms of who I was, so teaching African history and starting our own school was like really a dream as well. However, it didn't make a lot of sense because I was doing it with government money. So it lasted, and we serviced a lot of children. We had a great time, but Model City's money ran out and the school was over. And I went from there to, I did advertising, copywriting for Channel 29 when it first started. I did a stint with my own magazine with myself, Gail Wells, and Michael Copeland. We had a magazine called Buffalo After Dark, which was really a really slick little magazine. That's when Buffalo had a lot going on. We had clubs, and, you know, there was just a lot going on, a lot more that's going on now. I eventually landed a job with the Courier Express. And that was an experience in itself. It was a good experience. I was a general assignment reporter, but I always wanted to be writing for my own people because I didn't feel the things that I was writing was relevant to my community. And eventually I was at the right place in the right time. And I ended up at the Challenger in 1979 as a volunteer for a year. And the following year, I became part owner. And fast forward to today, 42 years later, I own it. When I was 12 years old, my parents bought me a typewriter for Christmas. And it was before, it wasn't a real quote typewriter, but it was one of those things where you turn the knob and you hit the presser and a letter would come out. So it was more like a stamper, but you could actually produce writing on paper. So I decided that I was going to make my own paper, and I did. And it was a one-page newspaper called the Project News. And it had the grand circulation of one, and they just passed it around. My friends would pass it around, and it was really funny because I think it was more like a little gossip sheet. And I kept it for years, and I'm so sorry I still don't have it, but that early I was interested in the written word. And then when I went to high school, I wanted to write for the high school paper, and I wanted to work on the yearbook staff, but Riverside High School at the time, there were only about 10 of us 10 Africans in the whole school. So it wasn't easy to get anything except an education. So I was never able to do that. But I was also introduced to the Challenger when I was a teenager because my friend's mother, June Carter, was the society editor of the Challenger at the time. And I was totally impressed with her and her writing. And I wanted to be just like June Carter. So I kind of had it in my blood, even when I went away to college. And this is just the continuum. When the Challenger was founded in 1963, there was a lot going on. We were at a crossroads in terms of civil rights and human rights as a people. We had Martin Luther King and the March on Washington happened. Medgar Evers was killed. There was civil unrest in the communities. 4 babies were killed in the Montgomery bombing. And Malcolm X was reprimanded for declaring that the chickens had come home to roost because Kennedy was assassinated. There were turbulent times, just like now. And the founding fathers intended for it to be here, because when they did found it, Arthur Eve, Cal Kimbrough, and was one other gentleman, it was three people who founded it. It was to, quote, challenge the system. and that's why they called it the Challenger. And it had a very rich legacy back in the early 60s and the early 70s. And when I came in, I did my homework, I researched, and vowed to continue that legacy. And hopefully, when I'm no longer here, that my daughters will continue it. If it's, if they want to. My oldest daughter is with me now, and both of them, in fact, are involved with the paper. And that's how we're able to sustain it, because we don't really have a quote unquote staff. We have the community is the staff, and we basically are at the helm. Giving credit to the founding fathers of this paper is important. And not only the founding fathers, but all the people who have been a part of it over the years. Just so many people. Clearly, I didn't do it by myself. So many people, I couldn't even begin to name them. That Baba Simba, Karen Campbell, who's actually many of them deceased. Bernice Jones, and even now Joe, we have Joseph Parker, who's still hanging in there and selling for us. There was Elaine Blyden, Daryl Rasuli, Sandra Bobo, Garfield Hinton, just so many people. Noreen, Brother Roy, who we call the captain, my crew who does the delivery every week faithfully. We love our delivery crew. Just so many people. It's truly a community effort. We normally publish about 16 pages, 16 to 20. We have enough material to put out 35, 36 pages. So that's a challenge, no pun intended, trying to figure out, what we're gonna put in and how we're gonna get it in. But it's been a great journey, and I don't have any regrets. And it hasn't been easy, but again, it's an institution. So, when you're trying to sustain an institution, you can't look at money, and you can't allow anything to stop you, if you can help it. And that's kind of like been the legacy. We've just sustained this pandemic. We're able to continue, to keep printing. We printed throughout the pandemic. I'd like to shout out Pastor George, now over at Lincoln Memorial, who's been very helpful to us, and yes, group ministries. Pastor of Second Chance Ministries, Reverend Boyd, my guy. He's been so good to us, because we've been in this building since 2009, and it's we haven't always been on time with the rent, but he's been great, and we totally appreciate him. And so many people. There's so many people. I've been honored by Essence Magazine, Tony Brown's Journal, which is no longer on air, the Buffalo News Citizen of the Year, Buffalo Business First. I've been honored at the United Nations. I've had well over 200 awards, but just about every community award there is, we've received it over the years. The very first award we received was in 1980, and that was the Ellicott District organization that presented the award. And on that particular award is my name and Eva Doyle's name, who was at the time had started her Eye on History column. So Eva and I shared the first award that the Challenger ever received in 1980. So there's so many awards. Freedom Wall is it's kind of overwhelming, it's kind of overwhelming to be on that wall with all those people that truly are freedom fighters and have done so much. I feel some kind of way sometimes when I pass by and see that big head looking out at me from the wall. But I'm appreciative, and if the people who did it feel that I deserve it, then I'm honored. But it's a little overwhelming to be on that wall. First of all, everybody in the projects out in Black Rock, with the exception of maybe a couple of families, there was a male in the house. There was a father in everybody's house with a job. And so even though we lived in the projects, it was balanced. You know, people sat down, they ate together, they broke bread together. We had curfews, we had to be in the house at a certain time. It was just a whole different atmosphere. And I think it made a big difference in the way we turned out. Because, you know, right now the families are pretty, they're not as tight and they're not as close, and it doesn't make a difference. My family, I'm a single mom, but I kept my family together. And my family, my mom and dad, you know, they helped a lot. They helped me raise my children. So family, I think, means everything. And even when we were growing up, the young people who didn't have a dad in their household, the fathers, you know, in the development were still their fathers. So that extended family was very effective, and it meant a lot. When I was 16 years old, my father lost his job. And that was a devastating experience for me at 16, because my prom was like 3 weeks away and I didn't have a dress. So I was very distraught, and I remember just lamenting how upset I was and how could Daddy lose his job. And my prom was right around the corner, and my mother, who didn't say a lot, but she did a lot. She's in the basement washing. She did a lot of washing. And I'm sitting on the steps with my head in my hands. And she looked at me and she said, you know, you don't have any faith. And I said to her, what is that? And she just turned around and kept singing and washing. Well, my mother, the next week, got a job. My mother didn't work when we were coming up. She was a homeowner. She had 7 children. And she went and got a job at the sample shop. The sample shop used to be a very nice, I would say almost a high-end store on Hurdle Avenue. And the warehouse where they would mark clothes that would go into the stores, this high-end store. The guy hired my mom because she was very, very bright. She didn't finish high school, but she was a walking computer. She knew numbers. She could remember numbers. And he hired her and then allowed her to pick a dress and pay for the dress on time. Every week, he would take so much out of her check. But I'll have you know that I had the most gorgeous dress for my junior prom. I didn't have a problem with faith after that. You couldn't have told me that would have happened, but it did. And so this journey with this paper, there's been a lot of no prom dresses, believe me. But I never lost faith. I always had faith that in the end, everything would work out. We weren't members of any church per se, but we were raised to believe in God and to be correct. And the church, quite interestingly, that I was most affiliated with at one point when I was like 13, we were like 10 to 13, was the Salvation Army. Because the Salvation Army would send a bus out to the projects to pick us up and take us to the chapel and then bring us home. And every Christmas we get toys. So we were made sure we went to church. That was, we were just kids. But faith is a good thing to have. And faith is what has sustained me all these years at the paper. The Challenger is an institution that thinks it's a business. You see, had I thought differently, I wouldn't be here, and I don't think the paper would still be here. And I need to write a book, and I'd like to travel more. And I've been into the healing arts for at least 20 years or more. I've been a vegetarian now for about over 50 years. So I'm really into the healing arts, and I'd like to get more into that. And just ride on off into the sunset. Peace. My name is Al-Nisa Banks, and this is how I came up.
What is your name and where are you from? Hello, my name is Sam Hill. I'm the host of How I Came Up. How I Came Up is a platform for our entrepreneurs and professionals to share their successes and their struggles. And hopefully, they'll give us some tips to success. Now let's get to it. This is how I came up.